This video is about crafting projects I do with students at the Lessing Gymnasium Neu-Ulm. 10 years ago, I had the idea of taking an unusual approach to career preparatory project seminars. These seminars are designed to prepare 17 years old for project work in their professional lives. So I thought, why not simply spend a week simulating a small construction company that actually builds something under real-life conditions. Through my connection to the restoration work on the historical fortress of Ulm, I immediately found a suitable field of work. I called the seminar Student Construction Workshop, or Schülerbauhütte in German. For 8 consecutive years, I dedicated myself to various restoration projects at the federal fortification with the students. The results exceeded expectations, and it was astonishing what unskilled young people could achieve with proper guidance. A new challenge arose for 2025, the construction of a hall on the school grounds. The plan was to have a workshop for future construction and crafting projects. My hope was that we can build a typical Danube ship there, a Ulmer Schachtel. For such projects, the hall shouldn't be too small. Therefore, the students first determined the approximate dimensions in a rough plan. The hall should be 5 meters wide and 15 meters long. Detailed executable plans were then created using CAD. My friend Tobias Vogt is a carpenter, and he was willing to support us with this project. It was important to me to use traditional timber construction techniques. A good opportunity to learn about these techniques was a student exchange with Sweden, where we analyzed historic buildings in Stockholm and Karlstad. Parallel to the planning of the hall itself, the students had to manage the procurement of materials and the financing. Fortunately, the Society for Preserving the Fortress in Ulm supported us. We helped with the association's maintenance work at Fort Albeck, and in return received materials for our hall. We were also allowed to fell several spruce trees on the fortress grounds, which we then had sawn into suitable beams or boards using a mobile sawmill. At Fort Albeck there was also an old hut that was to be demolished, whose roof area was roughly the same as that of our hall. In a strenuous operation we removed about 1,900 roofing tiles, cleaned them and brought them to the school. A place for the hall was prepared on the school grounds. We leveled the construction site with a borrowed excavator and installed a layer of gravel. This layer was carefully leveled and compacted. Only then did some people realize how large the hall would truly be. In July, the critical phase of the project began, the construction week. At Fort Albeck we set up a tent camp and spent 6 days manufacturing parts for the hall. Part of the student construction workshop concept is that the students can devote themselves intensively to their respective projects on site and take responsibility for the success of the camp. In an old factory hall we expanded an existing kitchen and installed a wood stove. This was used to prepare simple yet delicious meals. The first day of construction was dedicated to marking the wood. We had printed the CAD plans in large format, and there were individual drawings for each component. At first it wasn't easy to imagine how everything would fit together, but the precision of the CAD model would pay off later. We only produced mismatched parts when the dimensions weren't marked correctly, but fortunately that was the exception, because the students quickly learned that quality control is important and checked twice. Then we began working on the parts. Here, certain tools, such as the massive carpenter's circular saw, were reserved for professionals. However, the smaller handheld circular saws could also be operated by students after appropriate training. A specialized team also safely used the chain mortiser. It was used to create the tenon holes for the timber frame structure. We had set out to learn and apply as many traditional techniques as possible. The hall was built in individual modules. We wanted to prefabricate them at our workshop in Vorarlberg and then assemble the hall on the school grounds like a kit. The exterior walls were to consist of 8 modules, each 5 meters long and 2.4 meters high. This is where the meticulous preparatory work paid off. The timbers fit together perfectly. Two other teachers from our school were a great help to me. The exterior cladding was then also applied. We sawed boards to the correct length and screwed them onto the half-timbered frames. Then we made many meters of wooden strips and attached them over the joints. We installed frames around the windows like the ones we had seen in Sweden. By the third day, our little company was running smoothly and everyone has gotten used to the strenuous work. The food tasted delicious, and despite many overtime hours, there was still time for socializing in the evenings. But at times the weather didn't agree with our schedules and kept us from work with heavy rain. Several tents were flooded and all sorts of wet clothes had to be dried by the wood stove in the factory hall. While erecting scaffolding at the school's construction site, we also encountered a downpour so severe that there aren't even any pictures of the scaffolding work. During the rain, we did some work in the factory hall. There we made 24 shutters and 2 doors and painted them at the same time. For the roof structure of the hall, 24 roof trusses were planned, which, for the sake of economy and sustainability, were to be made from as much reclaimed material as possible. We salvaged many beams from the demolished building, which had also supplied the roofing tiles, and reworked them for reuse. Carpenter Tobias and a small crew assembled the roof trusses. Here in particular, the students learned that specialization brings enormous advantages in terms of quality and time. On the 6th day, the crucial moment came when the parts were transported to the school. We rented a truck with a loading crane to load all the exterior wall modules. The roof trusses, however, were transported to the school on a trailer. Once we arrived at the school, the perfect match of our constructive ideas and the capabilities of the loading crane became apparent. The modules were placed directly from the truck onto the prepared concrete blocks and bolted together. Everything fit together precisely to the centimeter.
Ich?
Ich auch nicht.
Ja, du auch
Doch,
nicht.
ich hab
Da,
schon
du kannst ja.
So, und die kleine Schüsseln haben, die kriegen als nächstes die 2 Portionen. Da passt nur ein Löffel rein, leider.
The roof was battened in using 400 meters of roofing battens in the correct grid. It was important, of course, that the students had learned to pay attention to their own safety and correctly assess their own abilities during the previous week at the construction site. On this day, the construction site camp at Fort Albeck was dismantled and everyone was allowed to sleep in their own beds at home for the first time. The next day, only work on the hall itself remained. Right on time for the start of school, while the others were studying math or German, we started roofing and painting the hall. Roofing took practice and went faster with each tile. However, it became apparent that we had about 5 tons of roofing tiles and our muscles were already pretty worn out. Painting the exterior walls was time-consuming but very satisfying. The hall finally had the Swedish look we had planned from the start. We had imported the paint ourselves, directly from Sweden. We had brought 5 heavy buckets of the genuine Falu Rötfärg with us on the night train from Stockholm. The roof was finished before school ended. The paint was complete all around, only the installation of the shutters in the door had to be postponed. Now it was time to celebrate what we had achieved, because Lessing Gymnasium's school festival was scheduled for the same day. For many other members of the school community, it was quite astonishing that a finished hall suddenly stood where 48 hours earlier there had been nothing to see. We presented our work with pride and were pleased that the hall had performed well in its first uses. It's always difficult not to put off the finishing work. We had to tackle a lot of remaining work in small groups over the last few days of the school year. Dismantling scaffolding, hanging shutters, installing gates, and so on. But at some point that too was done, and we were able to make our own party in the Red Hall, as it will be called from now on. I'm extremely proud of what the students have achieved here. For me, the workshops are always a wonderful change from my everyday work, and I really enjoy working together with my students.